I guess you can learn a lot about a man by listening to things he says when life gets uncomfortable. Not what he says when everything's going right. I'm talking about when somebody corrects him, when he fails, when somebody needs help, or when life don't go his way. Because character, it usually shows up in your words before it shows up in your actions. Now I'm not talking about one bad day. I mean, we all have bad days. We all say things we don't mean. I'm talking about the phrases a man keeps repeating until they become an excuse for the way he lives. Today, I want to give you 5 of them. All right. Now, before we get into these, let me say something clearly. This ain't a video about calling somebody stupid. I mean, that's easy. Anybody can point a finger and make themselves feel better. This is about recognizing habits. And if I'm being honest, I've used some of these phrases myself over the years, probably more than I want to admit. But, the difference between a man who grows and a man who stays stuck ain't that one of them never makes a mistake. The difference is what he does after somebody shows him the mistake. So listen to these. Honestly, don't immediately think about your wife or your boss or your brother or some guy you don't like. Start with yourself and think about them. The first phrase, it wasn't my fault. Now, sometimes, it really ain't your fault. Bad things happen. People make decisions that affect you, and you can do everything right and still end up, dealing with somebody else's mess. But there's a difference between explaining, what happened and refusing to accept any responsibility for your part in it. A man that's always saying, it wasn't my fault. Usually he ain't looking for the truth. He's looking for an escape route. He wants to get away from the uncomfortable question. What could I have done differently? And that's where the growth stops. Look, maybe you weren't responsible for the whole problem, but were you responsible for choosing that person? Were you responsible for ignoring the warning signs? Were you responsible for waiting too long to deal with it? You may not be guilty of everything that happened, but you can still be responsible for what you do next. I mean, that's part of man's got to learn. A weak mindset will say, none of this is on me. Stronger mindset says, maybe I didn't cause all of it, but what part of it does belong to me. I mean, that's not self-hatred. It's maturity. And I'll tell you something I've learned. You can't fix what you refuse to own. So next time you hear yourself say it's not my fault, stop and ask, what part of this is mine? That one question, it can change the direction of your life. All right. Number 2, the second phrase, is I already know that. And I understand sometimes somebody's telling you something, you've heard 100 times. Sometimes they really are talking down to you, but if I already know that is your automatic response to every correction, every suggestion, every new idea, you might not be knowledgeable. You may just be you may be on the defensive. There's a difference between knowing something and actually living it. A man can know that, he needs to control his temper and still lose it every time somebody challenges him. He can know that he needs to save money and still spend every dollar he makes. He can know he needs to treat people better and still keep hurting the same people over and over. Knowing ain't the same as applying it. I mean, I can tell you all day long, that exercise is good for you, but if I won't ever get off the couch, what good is that knowledge doing me? I mean, sometimes, we already know that to protect our pride. Because if we admit somebody taught us something, we feel like we've lost some kind of status. But a secure man you don't have to pretend you know everything. He can say, I've heard that before, but maybe I'm missing something. That's humility. And humility don't make you small. It keeps you teachable. The moment you believe that there's nothing left to learn, you've already started going backwards. Now you third phase, somebody says, that ain't ever going to work. Again, sometimes an idea really is bad. Sometimes a plan needs to be questioned. A man shouldn't be so positive that he loses common sense. But some men reject everything before they even understand it. They hear a new idea and immediately explain why it can't be done. They see somebody trying something different and they call it crazy. They see somebody, taking a risk and call it impossible. And a lot of the time, that ain't wisdom speaking. That's fear wearing a work shirt. Because if I convince myself something can't be done, then I ain't ever got to risk failing at it. I never had to be embarrassed. I never had to find out whether I was capable of more. I've watched men spend years criticizing people who were brave enough to try something they were too scared to attempt. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and point everything that could go wrong. But a man of character, he don't need every outcome guaranteed before he takes the first step. And he asks better questions. What would it take? What can I learn? What's the first move? You don't have to believe every dream's going to work, but don't bury it before you've even given it a chance. Sometimes, the first person standing in the way of your future is the person in the mirror. Number 4, your fourth phrase is I don't care. Now let me be clear, there are things you shouldn't care about. You shouldn't build your entire life around the opinions of strangers. You shouldn't let every comment on the internet ruin your day. You shouldn't chase approval from people who don't know your story. That ain't what I'm talking about. I'm talking about using I don't care as an armor. Some men say they don't care because caring would make them vulnerable. They say they don't care because they might fail. They say they don't care because somebody's rejected them before. They say they don't care because admitting something matters would mean they got to do something about it. But a man who truly cares about nothing, he ain't free. He's just disconnected. He don't care about his health. He don't care about his word. He don't care how he treats people. He don't care whether he wastes his life or not. That ain't strength. That's surrender. A good man should care deeply about the right things. He should care about keeping his promises. He should care about how his actions affect his family. He should care about the kind of example he leaves behind. The goal ain't to care about everything. The goal is to decide what matters, then have the courage to live like it matters. All right, fifth phrase is, what do I get out of it? Now, I'm not saying you should never think about fairness. You work hard and you should be paid fairly, but you should have boundaries. Don't let people take advantage of you. But if every relationship, every favor, and every conversation comes down to what you personally receive, something inside you starts getting smaller. You stop seeing people as people. You start seeing them as opportunities. And you ask, what can this person do for me? How can this help me? What am I going to get in return? And eventually, people feel that. They may not be able to explain it, but they know whenever interaction with you it's going to come with a price tag. You know, a man's character ain't measured, only by what he does when there's something in it for him. I mean, it's measured by what he does when nobody's paying him, praising him, or keeping score. I mean, can you help somebody without needing applause? Can you show up for a friend when it's inconvenient? Can you do the right thing, even when it don't help your position at all? I mean, that's where character gets real. Because life ain't only about what you can take from the world. You know what? At some point, you got to ask what you're bringing to it. Are people better because you were there? Is your family safer because of the way you live? Do the people around you feel encouraged, or do they feel like they're used? I mean, that's a hard question, but good questions usually are. I mean, here's a bigger lesson, and y'all. This phrase, it don't automatically make somebody a bad person. Everybody has weak moments. Everybody gets defensive. Everybody avoids responsibility sometimes. But repeated words reveal repeated thoughts. And repeated thoughts, they become habits. And habits, they eventually become your character. I mean, that's why we have to pay attention to the language we use. If I keep saying it's not my fault, I train myself to avoid responsibility. If I keep saying I already know that, I train myself to reject instruction. If I keep saying that's impossible, I train myself to quit before I start. And if I keep saying I don't care, I'm training myself to disconnect from what matters. And if I keep asking, what's in it for me, I'm training myself to live a selfish life. But the good news is you can change your words. And when you change your words, you start changing the thoughts behind them. Instead of, it's not my fault, try, what part can I own? Instead of, I already know that, what can I learn here? Instead of, that's impossible, try what's first step if we do it. Instead of, I don't care, try what actually deserves my attention. Instead of what do I get out of it, try, what can I contribute? I mean, that right there is the character first method. You start with the inside, then the outside begins to follow. So, let me ask you something. Which one of these phases have you caught yourself using too often? I mean, not which one bothers you, not which one does your boss use, which one have you used? And don't tell me you've never used at least one of them. I mean, for me, the older I get, the more I realize that character ain't built in one big heroic moment. It's built in the small choices that, nobody claps for or even notices. It's how you respond when you're corrected. It's whether you keep your word. It's whether you take responsibility when things go wrong. It's whether you care about more than yourself. And if you're a young man watching this, don't wait until you're 50 to start asking these questions. Pay attention now. The man you're becoming is being built by the things you do every day. Now, if this video give you something to think about, leave me a comment and tell me which phrase hit you the hardest. And if you ain't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe for me. I just try to talk about real stuff, character, work, life, relationships, and becoming a good man that people can trust. All right, y'all. Y'all be kind to everybody. Try to live a little lighter today, and I'll see you on the next one.